Hey everybody, welcome back to Clutch Fishing. If you're watching this and you find it helpful, please like it and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get into this. So first thing I want to start with is show you how to use a Wolf River rig. Here in Wisconsin, this is a very effective way, and really anywhere, to fish early season walleye. Typically they're coming up these rivers throughout the end of March and April, and these fish are glued to the bottom or pretty close to the bottom. So even after a while, obviously they'll go up into the shallows and feed just like any walleye will, right before dark or right in the morning, and sometimes during the day. The way that I fish them, a lot of people use this a different way. A lot of people pump these, long line them and pump them behind a boat. I do a lot of fishing from shore, so I do mine a little different and a little heavier. But the basis of this, you're going to need a three-way swivel. This is how I create my Wolf River rigs. On the up run, the fish are coming up the river, so they're generally within a foot of the bottom. This is how I do it. I'm going to just show you real quick how I do it. It's super easy. This is actually a medium heavy, but it's a light medium heavy, and it's 7.5 feet long. We have a lot of sturgeon and carp and suckers that come up this river, and you're constantly fighting the current, and it just can be really hard on your line and your rod. I want to be able to make sure I get a good hook set, so I use a medium heavy. You can get away with a medium with this. I would not use a heavy. I would not use anything lighter than medium personally. Anywhere you have current, and typically that's where you're going to be using this setup. So the setup consists of a three-way swivel, a floating jig, and a sinker. It's almost like a drop shot rig, but it's a long lining drop shot rig. There's a couple different types. I mean, you can use beads and floats as well. You can get these floats just about anywhere. You just put your line through them, and then you can hook a regular walleye hook, like an octopus hook or whatever you choose to use, mosquito hook. What I use is floating jigs. Now, if you're going to use this style of floating jig that looks like any old jig, realize that this runs down. This is going to run hook down like this. So when you tie it, when you put your minnow on, make sure you go down through the top of the nose for this kind of hook. I like to use these. I can't remember what they're called, but these right here, these kind of swim in the nice and slow in the current because of their super roundness, I guess, and they got a nice big hook that goes all the way through, and your eye is right there. And it's just, these are, a lot of people think that you got to fish a really small presentation for walleye. If a walleye is feeding, I mean, those things will eat 6-inch baits, easily. I mean, when we cast onto pier and cast at night for them, we're using some of the biggest Rapalas or husky jerks that you can find. Because it's a bigger floating jig, I can really use a small minnow on it, and it'll still be a nice big presentation. Sometimes the minnows run small at your bait shop. So I'm going to show you how I do this. First thing you're going to do, pull your main line out, cut a piece off. You want to use 6 to 8 pound test on this for sure, because you're going to be pulling up into the current. So do not use anything lighter. You can use 10 pound on your main line if you want. But there, I cut a long piece off, tie it on to one of the three-way swivels. Just like this. I just use a fisherman's knot. Cut your tag end off, and in the river you want to cut your tag ends real short. You don't want that. That's not going to work, because that is going to get leaves and grass on it from the current floating all the stuff down the river. So yeah, that's a little better. Okay, now the way I run them, you can run them a lot of different ways. I run at least 3 feet, and from there I'm going to tie this jig on. I like a nice long line on this so that it can swim that jig around a little bit. That's just how I do it. Some guys I know only do like 1.5 feet, and that's just fine. Make sure that's nice and long. So I got about almost 3 feet there, probably a little less. Okay, so now I've got that tied onto my three-way swivel. So I got another piece of line right here. Now I'm going to run a line down to what's going to be my sinker. Now, the sinker is what gets caught on this rig most of the time. Sometimes it is the hook, But usually if you're going to get snagged, it's going to be because the sinker went between two rocks or around a stick or something. I'm going to tag it to my 3-way with a regular fisherman's knot. But down to the sinker, I'm actually just going to do a couple overhand knots. Sinkers are a dime a dozen, and you don't want to lose your whole rig. So basically you want that sinker to be able to pop off if you need to. Okay, so I've got my 3-way. This is the setup, okay? I got almost 3 feet. It's a little long. 2.5 would have been fine. Almost 3 feet to a floating jig. Okay, there's my 3-way. And then one line coming off, 2 feet. I'm going to leave it long. I'm going to leave the weight off it so I can judge the current, because I want that weight to be perfect. So when it comes out of the current and starts hitting that breakwater or that flat or whatever you're fishing, I want it to stop right there. Sometimes, if you use too light of a weight, it'll just throw it right into the shore. You still catch fish that way. I just don't recommend it, obviously. And then, of course, your third is for your main line. And that's it. The next thing you want is a bell for your rod, especially if you're going to be throwing a main line. If you're going to just be watching Wolf River rigs, you could just watch your tips. But I like to jig or cast, which will bring me to my next point on what I bring with me when I go walleye fishing. On the up run, I have caught, literally, I don't know how there's no tears in here. This is a Mr. Twister tail, like a worm color with a chartreuse tail and an orange jig, and I've caught so many walleyes on this. You can see all the lines on there still. So I just keep this rigged up. It might just be rigged up perfect. But this time of year, I'm usually using minnows, even on my jigs. You don't have to. You can totally get away with plastics if the fish is hungry and you put it in front of their face, they're going to smash it. And then you've got your regular, your power bait type stuff. This is a stand-up jig that I use when I want to drag. I'll drag like this, it'll come swimming like this, and then it'll sit up just like it's supposed to. That's like a tabletop jig, I think that's what they call that, stand-up jigs. You got your tried and true, shad wraps, husky jerks, thunder sticks. I got all that stuff. Ripping wraps you can use, whatever you want to use to, as soon as it's about to get dark and they start really feeding, you could usually get away with casting a Rapala or some sort of crankbait for them. So that's just what I do. Kind of show you more in the future. You'll definitely see me using this rig. I always throw a Wolf River rig. I don't always catch a lot on them because I don't long line. I don't actively fish them. I set them in a rod holder and just leave it there. But I do catch walleyes like that each and every year. So this time of year, there's a lot of stuff floating down the river. Check these often, probably every 10-15 minutes. Water's high, things are floating down. There's ice, there's sticks, there's leaves, there's grass, there's, you might lose your minnow on your cast and you don't even know it. So just check them constantly. Otherwise, you're just shooting yourself in the foot as far as that goes. And also bring a net, because you have that sinker, right, flopping around. Once you get that fish up to the surface, that sinker's going to flop around when you're trying to boat flip it onto the shore. I don't recommend it. I do it sometimes, but if that sinker takes one wrong turn, pops the hook right out of the fish's mouth, you lose the fish. The last thing I want to leave you with, now I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I have never kept a spawner. I'd be lying to you. But for reproductive purposes, if you're fishing this up run and the fish are coming up and you catch a 23-inch beautiful walleye, just fat, full of eggs, to each their own, okay? But to me, the right thing to do to that fish is let it go back in the water and do its thing. You might catch that same fish, or somebody might catch that same fish on the down run, okay? But at least it had the chance to get up there and do its business. Most of the time, if I keep a spawner, it's either super badly hooked, which usually doesn't happen with walleyes in the river. You usually got them by the mouth. Or I didn't know it was a spawner and it ended up having eggs in it or something like that, Wisconsin changed their laws. It's 3 fish any size, It's tougher for guys to let go of spawners, but at the same time they're not keeping 5 spawners, you know. So that's just my little piece of advice. Take it or leave it. Don't I'm not judging you. Please don't judge me. You might see me catch a spawner and say, you know what, I'm eating this, you know. But typically I'm going to let that fish go and try to catch some males, because anywhere there's females, you're going to have males. So you get your line back out in the water. Thank you for helping me. I think it's time to do a giveaway. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet, so stay tuned. But I'm going to do it, and it's going to be good. It's not going to be like a lure. It's going to be good, and you're going to want to have a chance to win it. So I really appreciate all the support. Never even thought I'd get here, so that's pretty cool.